Hey guys, Jean-Paul again. Here's Royce Cousins, and we are still talking about the Man in the Mirror book. We are in chapter 20, and this is an interesting chapter in my opinion. It's called Avoiding Suffering. And the reason this one strikes me as so interesting, Royce, is that one of the first questions that it brings up is avoiding suffering even possible? And this is something I feel like, or at least I have felt like in the past, that I'm pretty good at, even if it's a false avoidance.
So you can avoid it in the short term, but maybe not in the long term.
You know, that is one of the definite conclusions I've come to. It's not an actual avoidance, it's a postponement.
Yeah, so if I could have a conflict with my wife that could be healthy but painful, I'm going to avoid it, which is going to make a bigger problem in the future. Okay.
Right. Well, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound so smart. Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the big points I got, was really you're not actually avoiding any pain, you're postponing it. Mm-hmm. And the reality is we're all going to suffer, even those of us that feel like we're pretty good at avoiding it. Mm-hmm. And the other big thing that I took away was there are different kinds of suffering.
Right.
And even more importantly, different reasons for suffering. So, you know, that can be everything from, wow, I'm just completely ignorant, and I made a stupid choice.
If I walk into a door, my head's going to hurt.
Right? Yeah. If I pull the trigger on this nail gun while it's pointed the wrong direction, that could be bad. Then there's errors in judgment. Right? It's kind of like a next level, and actually he lays out a list of 7 different ways that we can end up suffering, and it ranges from that, innocent ignorance. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't something that actually broke any rules, but there's still suffering attached. And then it goes all the way through the gambit to just straight up evil. Like there are just things that are done that 100% are wrong, and we didn't even invite it into our lives or open ourselves up to it. Yeah. And then there are a few shades in between. And for me, that was a revelation, because as somebody who has made a habit of, like one of my life goals kind of was avoiding suffering, and realizing, well, hey, there's different reasons for it. Now it forces me to stop and go, okay, should I be avoiding the pain?
Okay. So then there's another kind of level of it where it's like different kinds of suffering, meaning there's suffering that I may have to suffer for Christ, or if I end up, if there's a bad situation and I choose to engage and deal with that situation, it may cause me some pain, but maybe I'm shielding my kids from getting hurt or something like that. It's very, very appropriate, good for me to not avoid. But then there are things out there that are, they're not right for you to go through, as far as, biblically, legally, as far as you have a blessing and you're not cursed. So if you read Deuteronomy chapter 28, if you've been saved, you're now the righteousness of Christ, and you actually get to fall under the blessings column and not under the curses column. So while there's an element of, yes, you will encounter trials, you will engage in suffering at different levels, that's not God's heart for you. To just sit in suffering and be like, all right, well, I'm not going to even try to avoid anything because life is just hard, and that's just the way it is. So
that's interesting. A level at which it's like, well, there's some pain or suffering, you could say, that you actually shouldn't be experiencing, that maybe you submit to. That there is some suffering that you can willingly embrace by choice, and it may be right, it may not be. And then there's pain and suffering that maybe you should embrace as you step into the role that you fulfill, like you were saying, a protector for your family. There may be other circumstances and situations. I kind of think of like Revolutionary War era, right? Our founding fathers, they saw something going on and they willingly embraced a less than comfortable situation. They gave their lives and their fortunes for something. We see in Scripture some of those truths that God does call us, not necessarily to wrap our arms around every form of suffering that comes along. I think he even quotes in here, maybe it was Martin Luther that said, a man should not seek to take on a cross or suffering necessarily, but if it does come upon him, that he should bear it well. which it does strike me. We've talked a lot about a lot of issues that impact manhood specifically, right? Because we know these things apply to all of us. But when it comes to manliness, it's almost like embracing suffering, when it's appropriate, or enduring suffering well. That would be, I would look at that and go, man, that's manly.
Yeah, I love how Scripture says that Jesus, I can't remember if it was embraced or endured. Now, now I'm mixing it all up, but he endured the suffering of the cross because he was looking forward to the future, and he knew what he was going to get.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of the key to embracing suffering, where you're like, okay, I know what the outcome is, and it's a good outcome, and it's worth the cost.
That's really good. I mean, I hear this guy Jordan Peterson talk quite a bit about, just the way he puts it is embrace the tragedy. Put your arms around it, run to it, because it's just going to get worse. And if you embrace it, struggle with it, get through it, you're stronger on the other side. And it mimic, sort of another way of putting that, I think the verse that you were trying to quote said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And that's, what a practical example, right? From a verse that we may or may not have put a lot of thought into. What is on the other side of that suffering we're trying to avoid?
Which is a kind of a great segue into this life that we live is so short. And here on earth, we're going to have that pain and that suffering, and we're literally fighting evil. And we're dealing with stuff that we weren't supposed to deal with, in terms of if God had His way, Garden of Eden, and we hadn't sinned.
Right, we weren't in a fallen world.
Yeah, and so at some point we're going to remember back to this moment and be like, wow, that was so short. How was that such a struggle?
Right.
And so realizing that, it's like, okay, I have a bigger calling on my life than all of these little things. And so sometimes if I can quit focusing on this and I can elevate my thinking, it's going to help. And then also realizing too the opportunity of living here in this fallen world.
Right.
And I love how Bill Johnson talks about this. Originally, he was talking about this in terms of when his father passed away, and then more recently as his wife passed away. This is the only opportunity that we are going to have to praise in the middle of that suffering.
Right.
And that gift to God is so sweet to go, I don't understand. I'm so confused. I have no idea why it is that I'm going through this, but I know one thing. I know that you are good, and I'm going to press into you.
Yeah. That's a good spot to end. And that's exactly what I was thinking about. So guys, hopefully something in there spoke to you. I know on the spot, I actually learned a few good things about looking past the suffering to what is on the other side. So
how about those questions?
Yeah, let's take a quick look at these questions. Thanks for the reminder there. All right, questions for chapter 20. Number 1, is one of your goals in life to avoid suffering? Why or why not? Number 2, read 1 Peter 4:12 through 13. Are you surprised when you suffer? How can you rejoice when you suffer? Doesn't that seem a little unrealistic? Number 3, describe a recent or current situation in which you have suffered. Which of the 7 reasons men suffer do you think may have caused your suffering? 1, an innocent mistake. 2, an error in judgment. Number 3, an integrity problem. Number 4, a change in environment. Number 5, an occurrence of evil. Number 6, discipline from God. Number 7, testing by God. Question number 8, what is your typical reaction to suffering? Do you resist it? Review the 5 ways we attempt to avoid suffering and comment on which one or ones you employ. And number 9, read 1 Peter 5:10. What is our promise as Christians when we suffer? Do you believe God will always restore the suffering Christian? In what ways?
So if this is something you deal with, read the book.
It's a good resource. See you guys next time.